Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam.
Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. We have once again, we welcome you to our podcast. MashaAllah, this time we have our respected Moulana Abu Bakr Salim, MashaAllah, from Huddersfield with us, MashaAllah. Hazrat Moulana, how are you today?
Alhamdulillah, very good. So Jazakallah for having me today.
MashaAllah. So, Moulana is a very active leader of the community, MashaAllah, active in many different projects and MashaAllah doing many different types of work. So, Alhamdulillah, we would like to ask Moulana about his journey. He's, MashaAllah, graduated as a alim as well as MashaAllah, he has recently completed a master's, MashaAllah.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah.
So, you, MashaAllah, you've got both.
Alhamdulillah, it was one of those things which, after graduating, you kind of go into imamat as we kind of do, and then as you kind of start working in the community, you realize, maybe it's beneficial to have a bit more education, a bit more understanding, and Alhamdulillah, that kind of led me to pursue a master's. Alhamdulillah.
So, what did you do your master's in exactly?
My master's was specific. The title of the master's is Religion, Culture and Society. But my main focus in that was looking at how governmental and political policies affect the Muslim community. So policies like Prevent and others which kind of target Muslim communities. It was mainly looking at those kind of policies and looking at, critiquing those specifically. And then towards the end, I started looking at, because of working for National Zakaat Foundation, as well as working for a couple of other organizations as well, where there's a lot of talk about Zakat. And so my dissertation for my master's was actually looking at the scope of Zakat in strengthening the kind of the Ummah, strengthening the white Muslim community.
Subhanallah.
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, what I see is you've mentioned the word prevent and policies, etc. And MashaAllah, I believe you have worked with men then along these lines. How was the journey?
Alhamdulillah, to be honest, it was something which I didn't really expect to go into that area. It was a friend of ours, Moulana Abdul Jabbar, who I believe it was him. I spoke to him when the opportunity first came up,
MashaAllah.
and he said, Bismillah, go for it. And went for it at the time, and Alhamdulillah got into it. But it really what that journey did was it really kind of opened up my eyes to sort of the challenges British Muslims were facing across the UK, specifically relating to Islamophobia itself. And Alhamdulillah, as we started I was there for about four years in total at MEND. And during that time, we saw kind of many cases, saw many incidents, and Alhamdulillah worked on many different things. One of the things that I was kind of quite happy to be part of was towards the end of my time at MEND, we started actually doing tours around the country where we were training imams on politics, on media.
Yeah, I think you did one here also.
Yes, there was one here as well. There was one in Scotland, there's one in other areas as well.
So what message would you like to give to our listeners, specifically the ulama, to go into this type of fields? Do you think Islamophobia is a big issue in UK and we need to tackle these kind of things?
I think it's definitely a big issue. I mean, just recently, one of the organizations that monitors Islamophobia just recently mentioned that I think there's been about 70% increase over just the last year in terms of Islamophobia, where the numbers are actually the highest they've ever been. And just on my way here today, I just saw a video in my hometown in Huddersfield where a fire was basically petrol bombed a shop, and apparently the police are still there at the moment, so the investigation is going to, don't want to say anything, but some individuals who were kind of eyewitnesses said the person said, threw the petrol bomb in the shop and said, PAKI. So it's obviously things that happen. I mean, we saw the attacks on the masajid last year,
Yeah,
just
during the
a few
summer.
months ago actually. So it's definitely
Like sometimes people get really emotional
yeah.
and they like to blame Muslims for everything. Like,
Well, there's sadly it's more than that. It's where you've got individuals in positions of power that are targeting the Muslim community.
true.
That's the issue. I mean, with our community, I think it's always that we've always been a very reactive community, sadly, and this is something we really need to work on, is being a bit more proactive. And the only way we can do that is when we start proactively going into these kind of areas. We're scared of politics, whereas politics is part of our deen.
True.
It's one thing. Moulana Abu Bakr from Pakistan, the Pakistani politician, he was here a few months ago. He said that beautiful thing. If you remember, yes, it was beautiful. I mean, I don't follow Pakistani politics, so people might have their different views on Moulana Abu Bakr, but what he mentioned at that time was so profound that siyasat is that thing within Sharia that creates the environment for you to be able to follow your deen. And it's not something to, turn away from.
Whatever barriers that come in the middle, siyasat will remove it.
Yeah.
You need siyasat.
Absolutely.
I think in the last podcast we had our local MP here. MashaAllah. So that's one of the things we were mentioning about it as well. That the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that كانت بنو إسرائيل تسوسهم الأنبياء. They were, the politicians of Banu Israel were the prophets. Sulaiman alayhi salam being the prophet of the time, as well as the king of the time. His father Dawud alayhi salam, prophet of the time, king of the time. And like this, many prophets, mashallah. So it's like we have separated the two kind of thing. Like in Moulana is just for like masjid, madrasa, bas up Allah kare, you just stick to your own little bit, leave these, academic things and these policy making and these law, and these are like, Islam is a thing that governs with everything. When it's Imamat al-Sughra and you have Imamat al-Kubra, the great Imam, the Prophet of Allah was, subhanAllah, leader. And we have a lot to learn from the life of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at it from the angle as well.
Yeah.
As a politician, subhanAllah, how he changed the whole, Arab world from where he was to within a short span of time. It is a miracle in Islam. We all know the seerah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mentioned it on Eid day here. Normally on Eid day, people here they talk about if it's Ramadan, then they talk about fast. You've just finished fasting and things like that. And normally, if it's Bakr, then people talk about Ibrahim alayhi salam and the Quran, etc. But I normally talk about random topics. So I saw that there was 10 minutes left for Eid Salah, and we see people in the masjid who we don't really see. Ramadan is coming, same thing will happen. So I started talking about the importance of being politically active, being strategic, being planned. How the Prophet of Allah, from being where he was in the Battle of Khandaq, that nothing was coming into Medina, going out of Medina. They were not even allowed. They were tying stones to the stomach. From that situation to 3 years later, he was conquering Mecca. How his strategy we need to learn. So I said, that's them 2-3 years if you were to study, from where to where. SubhanAllah, it'll make us politically more active. To be honest, the way we look at things at this moment in time, Muslim needs to be politically strong.
Yeah, I think one of the things, alhamdulillah, I have a seerah program on British Muslim TV on a weekly basis, and that's one of the things we're kind of discussing on there as well, is about how the Prophet ﷺ used to use strategy, and how the Prophet ﷺ used to kind of sign treaties, agree treaties. It's all part of politics. And yes, so the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is one that I always kind of marvel over. That the Prophet ﷺ, obviously it was a wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it kind of had to happen. But the fact that the Prophet ﷺ did that, Sahaba could not even understand. They couldn't understand what why the Prophet ﷺ was agreeing to such an, we won't be wrong to say, an oppressive. It was an oppressive treaty. But subhanAllah, that same thing because of the wisdom of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, turned out to be the greatest benefit for the Muslims. And sometimes we forget that in today's day and age, that to use wisdom and hikmah to really kind of turn things around, where sometimes you might see things that are going in the wrong direction, but hopefully in a few years that could really turn the opposite direction.
Like sometimes we want things to happen quickly, instant. Like, you know, we're living in a very fast world, fast food, and, you know, on this immediate instant this, instant that. So one thing, like, I make dua to Allah and Jibreel salam should just come and conquer the whole world, kind of thing. But, you know, Allah has ways of doing things. And Allah gives that wisdom to whoever He wishes. يُؤْتِي الْحِكْمَةَ. Allah is very hakim. يُؤْتِي الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. You know, Allah is very... So Allah does things in His own way. Yeah, we need to, you know, learn to be, you know, to... Maybe we may not understand, you know, why certain things are happening, why certain things, you know, are not happening the way we want it to happen. But we need to do our bit in every way possible, in every angle possible. So, Moulana, mashallah, you've recently, or I think it's been a while maybe, that you've joined the National Zakaat Foundation, mashallah, and we had a workshop here with you just a few days ago as well, mashallah, here about Zakaat and etc. So, how has the journey been with Zakaat Foundation?
Alhamdulillah, I've been with NZF just over a year now. It was before last Ramadan that I joined. First time in the charity sector itself specifically, and I think one of the reasons I kind of accepted the role was that it was where you were looking at benefiting the community locally, which I've always tried to kind of select roles where we can benefit the community locally here. And since then, it's been a very interesting journey in the sense that you learn a lot more. Even though as ulama, you know, we study about zakah, but there's so much more
practicality.
Yeah, there's so much more on zakat that sometimes we don't cover in as much details as we should. And so it's been interesting, kind of a learning journey, and at the same time looking at kind of the challenges. Obviously, we spoke about one challenge, Islamophobia, but then there's another huge challenge about poverty. Alhamdulillah, so it's been a very interesting journey.
So, do you think there's a poverty issue in UK? Many people, especially the elder generation, you know, who maybe people who are like, you know, in the 60s, 70s, for some reason, a lot of them, they believe that there are nobody who we can give zakat to, you know, in this country. On one side, we have, like, for example, you know, the government systems, education, NHS, benefit system, child system. They say in this country, they all know zakat. What the heck? So, what advice do?
That's been the challenge over the year. That's been the challenge, is changing that mindset. To most places where I go and kind of talk about zakat in general, that's usually the main issue. The main issue that people, that is there really people who are eligible, and some would kind of passionately argue to try to prove that it doesn't exist. I think one of the reasons for that is because historically we've had a decent benefit system where the government was providing for those who were not working, etc. There were many benefits. I mean, I remember when I was studying when we were in Darul, and between the ages of 16 and 18, we used to get £30 a week. Yes, there's something like we used to get that. Whereas we weren't working or anything, we were studying. We used to get those kind of things. But the thing is, the situation in the UK has changed a lot since then, and I think that's where the challenges are. I mean, you know, people say that there's a benefit system. That's fine, but how much are people getting from that? And sometimes we hear about, you know, the people who have been able to use the system and get as much from them. We hear those stories, but we don't hear where people are actually suffering. A prime example was just during this last year, a sister who had a small child, and she was put into no husband, no family, sister, small child. I think the child was may have reached 1 year old or maybe younger, and so they had put into a hotel as an accommodation. And then other than that, she was given £9.50 a week to survive on. And £9.50, you can barely get a burger and chips today. And there, she's got a young child. You can't probably even get nappies and food for the child. And then now the sister's got her own sanitary products and various other things that she needs to get for her own use. So yes, you can say she's getting benefits, but £9.50.
Is it enough? Yeah,
it's not enough to fulfill the basic needs.
No, definitely. So, if you can just tell us a bit more about this National Zakat Foundation, how did it come along, and how is it going so far? Because not many people know about it.
So, National Zakat Foundation, it was set up in 2011. So it's been a good 13, 14 years since it was set up. But initially it was set up looking at the need of specifically Muslim sisters who had kind of been victims of domestic abuse, and they were left to kind of fend for themselves. So it was set up mainly to kind of support them. Then as the organization grew, the charity grew, kind of understood that there's a much wider need as well. So alhamdulillah, started growing from there to support individuals from any background who were struggling financially. Alhamdulillah, now it's in a position where on an annual basis we distribute about anywhere between £6 to £8 million a year, and around about 20 to 30,000 people every year supported through that. I think a lot of people don't know about NZF because NZF has mainly been a very online based charity. So in terms of kind of being how other charities sometimes have events out there, regular events, and sometimes a fun day, sometimes a hike, or etc. NZF hasn't been very active on
out there in the open too much.
Yeah, so they haven't been very active in that sense previously. That's why it's kind of not probably as known. But that's what we're trying to change now. Is that going out into the communities, trying to understand what needs people have, and raising that awareness so that people, if they are struggling, then there is a charity there for you that you can reach out to and hopefully get some support from.
Because we have so many people, mashallah, who come here to get support for India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, these things. And people in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., they rely on donations from countries like UK and other countries. But like, I think I went to one program. I don't know if you were there or not. Not long ago. I think just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it was in Bradford. Islamic Relief was there. So they were mentioning that they have been running for over 40 years, 40, 45 years. I don't know exactly. So for many years we were like, trying to raise money for all these projects all over the world. But then for the last few years, we've realized that, there's a lot of need in UK. So now we've started, supporting a lot of projects in UK now as well. And they said that otherwise, if we don't support these projects in UK, then if our own house is not in order, then how are we gonna continue supporting the rest of the world? So sometimes we need to, help local projects. There are people in every area, every community, and we need to look out for these people. Like Allah mentions in the Quran, "Lis-sa'ili wal mahrum." Not every person who's in need will go and ask.
Yeah,
that's for us to go and look for them. That maybe this person, maybe he's zakat eligible, maybe he's like this, maybe because and not every person who asks maybe in need. It works both ways. You're in the field.
I mean, one of the things, I'll share a story with you. But one of the things is that, as I said, there is a lot of wealth within the Muslim community in the UK. I mean, the numbers you'll be aware of, where the estimations are between 130 to 150 million pounds is donated by British Muslims just in the month of Ramadan.
SubhanAllah.
So just in 1 month, up to 150 million pounds is donated. So it's a lot of money. And the thing is, this same challenge of looking after kind of your own house, it's such a shame in a way for our community that we've got this much money available to support the people, but then there's people in our own masjid who we're standing shoulder to shoulder with, but they are struggling. I mean, last Ramadan, just after last Ramadan, I was in Manchester, and in Manchester I went to speak about this specific kind of zakat and local zakat, etc. And I met a brother at a specific masjid. I won't mention the masjid. Met the brother at the masjid, and he said, he told me a story. He said, "I'm so glad that you've come to raise this kind of awareness here." He said, "Honestly, people have no idea what people are going through. And then he shared a story, and he said that this is somebody who's a regular musalli. So it's not somebody who doesn't come to the masjid. So it's somebody who's part of the community. He's coming to the masjid, lived in the community for years and years. And it was a matter of where during the month of Ramadan, he himself was actually struggling financially. He had 2 young children. I think the eldest child was maybe about 5 years old or something. And he was saying in the month of Ramadan, he was coming to the masjid to read salah. Like, the masjid didn't really offer iftar. They usually khujur and water, that's about it, nothing more. As most masjids do nowadays anyway. And he was saying during the month of Ramadan, I was struggling so bad that we couldn't afford suhoor and iftar. So we were either having to have iftar or suhoor. Obviously, iftar was more important, so they would have iftar and they would skip suhoor. And then one thing, some people sadly say, at least he was having 1 meal a day, whereas in back home they don't even get that. And then the brother actually shared what his meal was for the whole month. And imagine when you've got children, as parents, we know when you've got children, especially at the age of 3, 4, 5 years old, and you can't put food on the table for them. As a parent, you can imagine the emotions within you. You think you failed your children. And he was saying it was for the entire month, for myself and my children, the only iftar I could afford during the month of Ramadan, where we're having samosas, pakoras, everything ourselves, he was putting tea and biscuits. Survived on tea and biscuits for a full month.
And this is
during the month of Ramadan.
In the UK, Manchester.
In the UK, in Manchester. And then you're thinking to yourself, we're so generous, sending millions and millions abroad. By the way, I'm not against abroad. I think as British Muslims, we, alhamdulillah, Allah's given us wealth where we do have a responsibility to look after the global ummah. But you have to look at your neighbors to a side. And that's why the Prophet emphasizes on it so much. The hadith is so famous about a person's not a Muslim, he's not a believer, whose stomach is full, but the neighbor to his side is hungry. It's a very famous hadith. We don't emphasize on those kind of a hadith.
SubhanAllah. Many people, they say that all these charities are coming in, especially in Ramadan, when they come every day. Like, I think we are like a small masjid here, not been open that long. But like a masjid like ours, which is not like a really active masjid kind of thing. I had like over 200 people, no joke, calling me to ask, like, can we do collection in the masjid? So there's sometimes people, they say all these people coming to do collection, masjid, madrasa, this, Pakistan, India, whatever, all these countries where they come from. And, how many are going to come to do collection? I said, subhanAllah, until these people are coming to do collection, Qiyamah is not going to come. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, before Qiyamah time will come when the person will have to go out with his zakat. And he won't find anybody who will take his zakat from him. He said, if you don't come to me yesterday, I would have taken it. So I don't know what to do with my own money. Why should I take your money? SubhanAllah. But subhanAllah, you're talking about zakat and the system of zakat and everything. It's so beautiful. I was just reading the hadith of Adi ibn Hatim radiallahu anhu in Bukhari, where he was mentioning that the Prophet of Allah told him 3 things. So one of them was that, O Adi, if Allah gives you long life, then you will see that the person will go out, to give zakat, and he won't find anybody to accept it. So the Prophet of Allah mentioned 3 things, the long hadith. So he said, as if the Prophet of Allah was giving him dua, that may Allah give you a long life. So he lived up to like nearly 170 years or something. So he said, this was, I think, in the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, I think in the middle somewhere, where Mu'adh radiallahu anhu was the governor of Yemen. The Prophet of Allah has sent him there. So the first year he sent 1/3 of the zakat back to Medina. So Umar radiallahu anhu asked him that, oh Mu'adh, what are you doing? So he said, we looked at all the people in our area who had to give zakat, so they all give the zakat. And then we looked for all the people who were in need of zakat, we gave it to all of them. And then this is surplus, so we don't know what to do with it, so we are sending it to Medina. He said the year after, he sent half of it to Medina. And then the 3rd year, he sent all of that to Medina. He said, we took zakat from everybody because zakat is the pillar of Islam, everybody should be given zakat. If everybody give zakat properly, it would solve a lot of the issues of the ummah. Yeah. So the third year, everybody who had to give zakat, they gave all of them give zakat. So we couldn't even find one person who were in need of zakat. So we don't know what to do with this man. Sending it to Medina. This is just one area. Like one of the teaching of Islam is that when you give zakat to somebody, make him self-sufficient.
Mm.
And many people they say, oh, today this year we have fed 500 people. I said, brother, instead of like even one charity, instead of feeding 500 people, feed 50 people or 100 people who next year you don't have to feed them again. They'll be at least, if they're not giving zakat, at least they're not in need of zakat. And in a few years, they can build themselves and, like how you say, give the man a fish and then he eats for the day and teach him how to fish. So do you have this type of projects in
there's actually an example of that in the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There's a hadith in Abu Dawud Sharif, I believe, which we have come across where I believe Anas ibn Malik mentions that an Ansari came to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asking for help. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to him, do you have anything at home? And he said, I've got a wooden bowl and 2 pieces of cloth, I believe he said something along those lines. And he says, I use the bowl to kind of drink water from, and 1 piece of cloth away, and one I use as a kind of a carpet to sit on. And the Prophet said, bring that cloth and bring that wooden bowl. Did an auction, got 2 dirhams.
MashaAllah.
And then Prophet said to him, take 1 dirham, fulfill your immediate need, which was getting food for you and your family. And the other dirham, get an axe head from the blacksmith. Brought the axe head to the Prophet, and the Prophet himself attached the handle to it and said, here, go and gather firewood and sell the firewood. I don't want to see you begging again. And the person came after 10-15 days and he had 15-20 dirhams himself now. And that's kind of, so yeah, alhamdulillah, within NZF there is one of the funds that we do have is the empowerment fund. And that's specifically for individuals who don't necessarily have the skills or qualifications for a decent paying job. And so what they can do is they can enroll onto these educational programs, build their skills and qualifications so that they can get into kind of employment. So there's about 3-4 programs at the moment that are running, which some of them have kind of guaranteed employment at the end of it as well. So there are those as well. But however, with those, it's specifically again for those who are in poverty, who are eligible to receive zakat.
No, like many years ago, I'm talking about good 15 years ago, maybe more. But I was speaking to a particular person who was like part of this orphanage. I can't remember exactly where he was. Somewhere, I think maybe around Africa or somewhere. So they said that we only keep 50 orphans, or we keep a very limited number of orphans in our orphanage. But we give them the best. We make all of them Hafiz al-Quran. We try to make all of them good, like alim or like so many ulama. We give all of them like a skill, like one of them account, one of them like architect, one of them they're all like professionals. So then when they all finish, they get the jobs. Then at least they take responsibility of like looking after some orphans themselves. So like a, so Allah, like that's the beauty of Islam, that we continue our help. So subhanallah, Allah reward you, mashallah, for your any advice finally you can give to everyone in regards to.
I think the only thing I would say is that not necessarily advice, it's just a kind of a beneficial reminder that in terms of there's a lot of need locally in the UK.
True.
Not just in terms of kind of charity wise, in terms of in general, British Muslims are going through a lot of difficulties. For example, reforms on a rise. There's threats of the far right. There's threats of poverty. I mean, last Muslim census,
inflation and all this.
Last Muslim census, the figures was that 1 in 5 British Muslims are relying on food banks. So
we've got one as well.
So there's so many issues, and my only kind of reminder would be to the brothers and sisters is that let's start looking at kind of the issues our communities are facing locally. At least those issues where the community is united on. Zakaat and poverty is something affects every person, irrespective of your kind of theological background, your fiqhi background. Similar with Islamophobia, affects everyone. On those, I think as a community, we all need to. And if those 2 things we can hopefully stand together and challenge those two challenges, it hope inshallah will make a lot of other things easier. But the most important is we have to understand those issues as important. Otherwise, as you mentioned, we'll keep
definitely.
ignoring them,
No, true.
and we'll just continue weakening ourselves as a community. And the day then won't be far that where today we're helping so many that we won't be able to even help ourselves.
No, definitely. No, true. No, that is the beauty of Islam. Where Islam, Umar used to say that even a dog was to die out of hunger. What answer are you going to give to Allah on the day of Qiyamah? He put the flour and the grains on top of the mountains so the birds can eat. Even they even worried about the animals. Even animals need to be taken care of. So be it Muslims, non-Muslims, whoever. SubhanAllah, one Muslim they were mentioning that they realized that there was a non-Muslim family who had moved into the area and they were struggling financially. So some people in the masjid they got together and they did some shopping and dropped it to the house. So those people were in tears. They said, we never thought that Muslims were like this. They just, at the end of the Muslims are helping. No matter whatever the world says, Muslims are there for you. That is rahmatul lil alameen. That is what we learn from the life of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So jazakumullah, Hazrat Moulana, for your time and for your advice, and mashallah, Allah bless you, Allah reward you. And inshallah we'd like to benefit from you more as well, inshallah. Until we meet again, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.